What if I told you that the biggest technical scandal of the year was not an engineering error, but an inevitable consequence of a cold war between teams and the FIA? Was it really McLaren's fault? Or is there something else behind it? Lando Norris had delivered a solid performance, crossing the finish line in second position, while Oscar Piastri consolidated his progress with a valuable fourth place. But everything fell apart when hours after the competition ended, the official announcement came: both cars disqualified. The reason? A violation of Article 3.5.9 of the FIA technical regulations, which establishes the maximum tolerance allowed in the wear of the plank, a piece of synthetic wood found in the lower part of the car. This table is not a simple technical detail, but a pillar of the regulation of the minimum height of the car to the ground. In other words, a safeguard that prevents teams from lowering their cars excessively in search of more downforce at the expense of safety. The regulations are strict. The board must be at least 9 mm thick after the race, allowing a maximum wear of 1 mm from the original 10 mm. No excuses, without nuances. But after the post-race inspection, Norris' MCL 39 showed wear of 1.12 mm and Piastri's 1.26 mm. A difference of just tenths of a millimeter, but enough to change everything. This is where the real drama begins. Because while it is true that the data confirmed the violation, it is also true that these numbers do not reflect a deliberate search for advantage. This was not a risky strategy on McLaren's part, nor an illegal configuration planned in search of performance. It was rather the result of a combination of unpredictable conditions, a circuit with a particularly uneven surface, excessive aerodynamic bounces, the famous porpoising that did not appear in practice, and a much more aggressive racing environment for the flat bottom of the cars. Furthermore, the factor that many overlooked was the status of the previous practice sessions. During the days leading up to the race, the track was affected by adverse conditions, including rain and multiple red flags that significantly reduced usable track time. This drastically limited the engineer's ability to properly tune the car's ride height and accurately predict the actual wear the board would experience under racing conditions. On Friday, the crucial free practice 2 to simulate long runs and evaluate the race setup was practically not completed. All of this turns what at first glance seems like a technical error into a much more complex case, where the rigor of the rules collides with the dynamic reality of a chaotic race. But why did this case generate such a stir? Because the punishment was not a simple fine or a warning. It was a complete disqualification. 0 points. All the effort, the strategy, the perfect execution of an entire race, erased by 0.12 and 0.26 millimeters too much. A few hours after learning of the disqualification, Stella appeared before the media. His initial words seemed predictable. "We apologize to Lando and Oscar for the loss of points at a critical moment in the championship." But the important thing was not in what he said, but in how he said it. Because he immediately went from contrition to a strategic defense that, between the lines, called into question the technical framework of the sanction. Stella explained that McLaren's cars had suffered unusually high levels of porpoising, that vertical bounce that is generated when the aerodynamic flow cyclically collapses under the bottom of the car during the race. The interesting thing is that this phenomenon did not occur in the practices. Why did he appear only in the race? Because, according to Stella himself, both cars suffered minor structural damage that altered the dynamic behavior of the car. This is where his statement takes an explosive turn. He stated that after reviewing the cars post-race, they found clear signs that the flat bottoms of both cars had been compromised. Small bumps, imperceptible to the naked eye, but enough to alter the real height of the car under load, causing greater wear of the plank. In other words, the problem was accidental and not premeditated. And here comes the most powerful nuance. Stella assured that the FIA itself recognized that there was no deliberate attempt to violate the regulations. This is essential. In a sport where intention matters as much as result, as we saw in previous cases with sanctions for speeding in the pit lane or improper use of DRS, the fact that the FIA has admitted the lack of intention and still applied the most severe sanction reveals an extreme rigidity of the regulations. Furthermore, Stella hinted that the conditions under which the car was set up were abnormally limited. Practice sessions shortened by red flags and rain prevented the team from collecting representative data. In particular, the key FP2 to simulate long runs was almost unusable. Thus, McLaren entered the race without a reliable reading of the actual wear and tear the car would suffer with a full tank and racing tires. This point is not minor. Preparation is essential in Formula One. The margins of error are so small that a single millimeter of difference can be the result of a wrong estimate based on incomplete data. And that's exactly what happened. By making this series of technical arguments public, Stella was not alone defending her team. "I was planting a seed. An implicit criticism of a system that punishes without nuance, that sanctions without evaluating the real context of the race, and that applies the law without considering the margins of uncertainty that, paradoxically, are inherent to a sport as complex as Formula One." But the smartest thing about his speech was what he didn't say. He did not directly blame the FIA. He did not ask for a formal review of the regulations. He did not mention injustice. However, each of his sentences pushed in that direction. It was literally a bomb dropped with kid gloves. This episode also marked a key moment in McLaren's internal narrative. Stella, normally moderate, decided to publicly expose technical details that are usually kept indoors. And that suggests something important, that the team does not want this to be understood as a preparation error, but as a victim of a regulatory system that, in its desire for accuracy, can end up deforming the true competitive spirit of sport. The first key point is the very value of the plank as a measure of legality. This table, originally introduced in the 90s as a safety tool to prevent cars from running dangerously close to the ground, today has become a kind of technical trap that does not always reflect the real performance of the car, but rather a complex interaction between aerodynamics, wear, rebound, and the type of asphalt. Its function is no longer only to avoid excesses, but to control a phenomenon that technical evolution has made more unpredictable: porpoising. This leads us to an ethical dilemma. Can such a minor technical violation, in this case, between 0.12 millimeters and 0.26 millimeters of additional wear, justify the complete loss of the points achieved on the track? Or should there be a scale of sanctions more proportional to the context? Because in this case, the cars were not faster due to that wear and tear. They gained no direct advantage. They were just victims of a perfect technical storm. Now, is that fair? Should sports sacrifice context to maintain the perception of absolute control? Or are you missing the opportunity to evolve towards a more intelligent system, capable of differentiating between glitches, accidents, and real cheats? The sanction against McLaren may have followed the letter of the regulations, but ultimately it puts on the table a crucial question for the future of the sport. Is it time to rewrite the rules not only to control, but to better understand the real complexity of what happens on the track? McLaren's disqualification not only meant the loss of points in a specific event. It was an emotional, sporting, and strategic shock at the very heart of the 2025 championship. Until that moment, McLaren not only led the Constructors' World Championship with solvency, but had built a powerful narrative, that of the team that knew how to reinvent itself after its resurgence in 2024, now as the undisputed favorite for this new season. Lando Norris, with back-to-back podiums and a dominant victory in Australia, was leading the drivers' standings. Oscar Piastri, even without the same media visibility, was firmly anchored in the fight for the championship podium. Together, they had accumulated 111 points, taking McLaren to the top, more than 30 units ahead of Mercedes. But in a single night, that panorama shattered. The loss of the points obtained in Las Vegas not only reduced the lead in constructors, but also caused an emotional upheaval. For the drivers, especially Norris, it was a devastating blow. It is not just a matter of numbers. It is the feeling of helplessness in the face of a penalty that, according to their own testimonies, did not arise from a bad maneuver or a risky strategy, but from a chain of circumstances that were beyond their direct control. Verstappen, who had had a less dominant start, was now dangerously close to Norris in the table. And the psychological impact should not be underestimated. McLaren had built its rise based on a philosophy of progressive perfection. Every detail, every hundredth of a second counted. The message that was repeated within the team was only one: there is no room for errors. But this time the mistake was invisible. It wasn't a bad stop, nor a poorly given order. It was the kind of mistake that is born from the inherent chaos of Formula One. How is that managed from within? How do you rebuild trust when the enemy was not a rival but a norm? Do you agree with the FIA's decision? Do you think the norm should be applied with this rigidity regardless of the context? Or do you think it is time to introduce interpretation mechanisms that allow us to distinguish between the intention to deceive and an inevitable technical failure? Leave it in the comments what you think of all this.